Melissa sat at the small caf table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. She'd been sitting there for what felt like hours, lost in her thoughts, when her phone buzzed. Her heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Robert, her uncle. "Did you call about Mom's party today?" She sighed heavily, her fingers shaking slightly as she typed back, "Yes, about that." Robert's response came almost immediately. "We decided as a group not to attend. Carol, Adrian, and Diane's friends too." Confused. "Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming." Melissa stared at the screen, her mind racing. "But why?" She typed back. Robert's reply was slow to come, and when it did, his words hit her harder than she'd expected. "Your mother has been controlling and manipulating us for years. We've all put up with it for the sake of her perfect family illusion. But this time, when she prioritized her birthday party over Cameron's critical condition, we finally reached our limit." Melissa felt a knot tighten in her chest. She knew this was coming, but it still stung to hear it out loud. She hadn't realized that everyone else had noticed what she had been feeling for years. She was always the one stuck between her mother's expectations and her own reality. But this was different. "Uncle, how does everyone know?" She typed back, her heart racing with a mix of dread and relief. Carol shared it in the family group chat. From there, it spread to Diane's friends. No one could tolerate her self-centered attitude anymore. Robert's message said. The finality of it all hit her hard. She placed her phone down, staring blankly at the coffee cup, her mind swirling. The calf around her felt like a distant blur, the weight of the moment grounding her. Melissa had always been caught between her mother's need for control and her own desires. But now, it felt like the walls were finally starting to crumble. Her mother's selfishness had gone too far this time. Still, a part of her felt a deep sadness. Was this the end of everything? Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her mother's name on the screen. She stared at it for a moment, hesitating. Before answering, "Mom?" "Melissa?" Diane's voice sounded strained, almost like she had been crying. "I don't understand. Everyone seems to be avoiding me. I called Robert, but he didn't answer. Betty too. Not a single friend came." Melissa felt her heart tighten. She could hear the confusion and hurt in her mother's voice, but she also felt a sting of anger. How could Diane not understand why everyone was distancing themselves? The party, the selfishness, it was all too much. "I'm going back to the hospital now to see Cameron," Melissa said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a long pause before Diane spoke again, and when she did, it was with an edge of panic. "What should I do, Melissa?" "You should take some time to think about yourself, Mom," Melissa replied, her voice firm. "Think about why everyone wants to distance themselves from you." "I was supposed to be a perfect mother," Diane said, her voice breaking. "A perfect home, a perfect—" "That's the problem, Mom," Melissa interrupted gently, but firmly. "There's no such thing as perfect. And the perfection you've always sought has actually hurt all of us." Silence fell on the other end of the line, heavy and suffocating. Melissa could almost hear her mother's thoughts racing, but it was her next words that hit her hardest. "I was just lonely." Melissa's breath caught. She had never heard her mother sound so vulnerable, so broken. It was as if the walls Diane had built up for years had finally cracked, and now all that was left was raw emotion. Her voice softened. "I'll talk to you again, but right now I need to get back to Cameron." Hanging up, Melissa sat in the caf for a while, her elbows resting on the table, her head in her hands. She had wanted to cut ties with her mother, to finally sever the connection that had caused her so much pain. But now, after hearing her mother's words, she wasn't so sure. Was there room for forgiveness? Could things ever change? Her thoughts were interrupted by another phone call, and when she saw the name on the screen, she knew it was Cameron. She smiled, a rush of warmth flooding her chest. "Melissa?" Cameron's voice was weak but steady. "I'm awake." Tears pricked at Melissa's eyes. She rushed to the hospital, her heart lifting with the news. She had been so scared, but now, Cameron was alive. He was awake. When she entered the ICU, Cameron looked up at her with a tired smile. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm okay." Melissa ran to his side, her hand gripping his, her tears falling freely now. "Thank God," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Cameron's recovery was quicker than anyone had expected. Within 2 weeks, he was moved to a general ward. Melissa sat by his bed one afternoon, staring out at the city skyline of California, deep in thought. Cameron, noticing her distant look, spoke up. "What's on your mind?" Melissa shrugged lightly, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "Nothing." "Yeah, right," Cameron said with a smile, his voice teasing. "You think I don't know that look after almost 10 years together?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I was thinking about Mom." Cameron fell silent, his gaze never leaving her. He had known what it was like to deal with difficult family dynamics. He understood better than anyone. He had been there for her when things with her mother had gone from bad to worse. "Have you heard from her?" he asked quietly. "She's called a few times, but I didn't answer," Melissa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to deal with her anymore." Cameron gave her hand a gentle squeeze, despite the foreline in his arm. "Melissa, there's something I've learned these past couple of weeks." "What?" she asked, her voice weary. "The fragility of life," Cameron said, his eyes serious. "I was one step away from death, and I realized something. There's no guarantee of tomorrow. You can't carry around anger and hatred forever. It's like poison." Melissa looked at him, confused. "But she's always the same, Cameron. She never changes." "Even so," Cameron replied gently, "you can change. Maybe that birthday fiasco was the first time your mom really faced the consequences of her actions. It might be the catalyst for change." Melissa stared at her husband, a flicker of hope rising in her chest. Could things really change? Cameron winked at her. "Were you always this wise?" "Must be from the blow to my head," he joked. Melissa laughed, a genuine sound that filled the room. And for a moment, it felt like everything was going to be okay. The weeks passed by, and with every day that Cameron recovered, Melissa found herself thinking more and more about her mother. Diane's absence had left a hollow space, and although Melissa wasn't ready to forgive everything, part of her felt an odd sense of longing. It was a Saturday afternoon when the phone call came. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Even after all the years of silence, Melissa," Diane said, her voice soft and hesitant. "I know I haven't been the mother I should have been. I know you may not want to talk to me, but I need to apologize." Melissa stood frozen for a moment, the weight of her mother's words sinking in. For years, Diane had refused to acknowledge her mistakes. The fact that she was calling now, asking for forgiveness, was almost too much to process. "What do you want, Mom?" Melissa asked, her voice a mix of anger and exhaustion. "I want to explain myself, to tell you that I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to keep everything perfect, and somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really mattered." Melissa sat down on the couch, staring out at the California skyline, the sun starting to set in the distance. "Why now, Mom? After everything that's happened?" Diane hesitated. "I don't know. I woke up one day and realized I'd been living in a bubble, a fake world. The one I built for myself. The one where everything was always under control, always perfect. But it was all a lie, Melissa. And it's cost me everything. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to try." There was a long silence. Melissa ran her fingers through her hair, her heart in turmoil. It was like she was hearing these words for the first time. And in some strange way, they felt almost too late. But maybe, just maybe, it was the first step towards something better. "I don't know if I can just forget everything, Mom," Melissa said softly, trying to steady her emotions. "But I'll listen. I'm not asking for forgiveness." "Melissa, not yet," Diane said. "I just want to start over, slowly, step by step. Can we try that, for both of us?" Melissa swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "Okay, I'll try." The conversation ended with a sense of both relief and uncertainty. Melissa felt an odd sense of closure, even if it was only temporary. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally taking control of her own emotions. That evening, Melissa and Cameron sat in the living room, their legs tangled together on the couch. It felt like they hadn't had a moment to themselves in forever, with everything that had been happening in the past few months. Melissa rested her head on Cameron's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. "So, what do you think about all this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cameron exhaled slowly, the weight of the conversation pressing on him too. He had been the one to support her through so much, but he knew how heavy this all was for her. I think you've got to decide what you want. I can't tell you what to do with your mom, but I can tell you that you deserve to have peace, whether you find it with her or without her. I don't know if I can find peace with her, Cameron, Melissa said, her voice catching in her throat. She's hurt me too many times. I don't think I can just forget it. Cameron took her hand, gently squeezing it. It's not about forgetting. It's about healing. You can choose to heal, whether she's part of that process or not. Melissa closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. She had always believed that healing meant having everything figured out, but now, she realized it wasn't that simple. Maybe healing was about learning to live with the scars, without letting them define her. The days went on, and Melissa continued to wrestle with the idea of reconciling with her mother. She had grown up with Diane's expectations of perfection. And now, Melissa found herself at a crossroads. The truth was, she didn't know if she was ready to accept her mother for who she was. But one thing was clear, she couldn't keep carrying the weight of anger forever. One morning, as the sun filtered through the curtains of their bedroom, Cameron sat on the edge of the bed, tying his shoes. Melissa stood at the window, staring out at the bustling streets of California. I think it's time for me to go see her, Melissa said, breaking the silence. Cameron turned around, a soft smile on his face. I think that's a good idea. She turned to him, her eyes glistening with a mix of nervousness and determination. I don't know what will happen, but I can't keep avoiding this. You don't have to have all the answers right now, Cameron replied. Just take it, one step at a time. Melissa nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure how this was going to go, but she knew it was a step she had to take. The drive to her mother's house was quiet, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. When she arrived, Melissa took a deep breath before knocking on the door. It was almost surreal. It had been so long since she'd been here, since she'd been in this place that had once been filled with love and laughter. Now, it felt like a stranger's house. The door opened, and there stood Diane, her face soft and full of emotion. Melissa, Diane said, her voice breaking. I'm so glad you came. Melissa didn't say anything at first. She simply stepped inside, unsure of what to expect. The familiar smell of her mother's perfume, the photos on the walls, the sound of the ticking clock in the background, everything felt like it had been frozen in time. But Melissa knew this was a new beginning, a chance to finally take control of her own story. They sat down in the living room, facing each other. Melissa was the first to break the silence. I've been thinking a lot, she said, her voice soft but firm. And I'm not sure where to start. I'm not sure I can ever forget the past, Mom, but I'm willing to try. Diane nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. I understand, she said, her voice full of regret. I've hurt you so much, Melissa. I never wanted to. I know, Mom, Melissa said quietly, but I think it's time we both start being honest with each other. And so, the conversation began. It was raw, emotional, and difficult, but it was also the beginning of something new, something real. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, things began to shift between Melissa and her mother. Diane was trying, in her own way, to make up for the years of distance, but there was still so much left unsaid. Melissa found herself balancing the feelings of resentment with the desire for peace, trying to reconcile her past with her present. Cameron continued to be her rock, offering quiet support without pressuring her for answers. He knew the process of healing would take time, and he was there, every step of the way, encouraging her to take it slow, to let herself feel what she needed to feel. One evening, after a long day at work, Melissa sat in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. She was exhausted physically and emotionally, but there was a sense of calm in the routine. The rhythm of cooking, the scent of the broth, the soft hum of the refrigerator. It was simple, but it felt grounding. Cameron walked in, leaning against the doorframe, watching her for a moment before speaking. You know, I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Melissa didn't stop stirring. She had heard the words, but she wasn't sure she could process them right now. For what? For everything, Cameron replied, his voice steady. For doing the hard work, for letting yourself feel all of this. It's not easy, and I see how much it's taking out of you, but you're doing it. Melissa finally stopped, turning to look at him. She was tired, yes, but in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't noticed in a while, a quiet pride. And for the first time, she felt like maybe she could take a breath without feeling like she was drowning in the weight of her emotions. I don't feel like I'm doing anything right, Melissa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel like I'm constantly trying to fix things, but everything just keeps falling apart. Cameron stepped forward, taking her hand in his. You don't have to fix everything. You just have to keep showing up. That's all anyone can do. And you're doing it. Melissa nodded, her chest tightening. She couldn't remember the last time someone had told her that. She had always been the fixer, the one who held everything together, but now she was learning that sometimes all you can do is show up and keep going. Later that week, Melissa received a call from her mother. It wasn't unusual anymore, but this time there was a different tone in Diane's voice, more earnest, less guarded. Melissa, Diane said, I'm planning a small dinner. Just family. I want to make up for everything. I want to show you that I can be the mother you deserve. Melissa hesitated. There was a part of her that wanted to say no, to tell her mother that she wasn't ready. But there was another part of her, the part that wanted to believe in change, in the possibility of starting fresh. I'll come, Melissa said finally. But it's going to take time, Mom. I need you to understand that. I know. Diane replied softly. I'm just asking for a chance. A real chance. The day of the dinner arrived, and Melissa was both anxious and hopeful. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew she had made progress. Her mother had made progress. The past didn't just disappear, but maybe, just maybe, they could start rebuilding something new. As she entered Diane's home, she felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and wariness. It looked the same, but somehow, it felt different, less suffocating, less perfect. Diane greeted her with a warm hug, something that felt foreign but also comforting. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Melissa smiled gently, trying to mask the vulnerability she felt. I'm here, aren't I? They sat down to dinner, a simple meal, nothing extravagant, but everything felt more genuine than it had in years. The conversation was easy, not forced. For the first time in a long while, there was laughter at the table, not the awkward silence that had once filled the air. You know, Diane said as they ate, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Melissa, about perfection, and I realized I can't keep chasing it. I just want to be real with you. I want to be a real mother, not a perfect one. Melissa took a deep breath. I don't need a perfect mother, Mom. I just need you to be there, to listen, and to understand. Diane nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm trying. I really am. For the first time, Melissa believed her. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the clear California sky. The warmth of the evening settled around them, and for a moment, it felt like they were simply two people, mother and daughter, finding their way back to each other. I don't know where this will go, Mom, Melissa said quietly, but I'm willing to keep trying. Diane took her hand, squeezing it tightly. So am I. One step at a time. The conversation drifted into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, the kind that said, they were both in this together, however long it took. And for the first time in years, Melissa felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't the hope of a perfect family, but the hope of something real, something that could heal, even if it was slow and uneven. A few weeks passed, and though the progress wasn't always linear, there was a new understanding between Melissa and Diane. Things were still delicate, but the small steps felt like victories. Melissa continued to balance her time between her mother, her husband, and her own self-care. The emotional toll was still there, but now there was more room for healing. One afternoon, Melissa sat by Cameron's side in the hospital lounge, reading a book. He was well enough to be out of the ICU now, and although he still had a long road ahead, there was a noticeable improvement in his recovery. Melissa's phone buzzed on the table, and she picked it up to see a text from her mother. I know. It's been a while, but I wanted to tell you something. I'm proud of you. I'm working on it. I promise. Melissa felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't much, but it was something. Diane had never been good at expressing emotions, especially in writing, and yet, this simple message felt like a bridge between them, fragile but real. Cameron looked up from his book, noticing the emotion in her face. You okay? He asked softly. Melissa nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. Yeah, just something from my mom. Cameron smiled gently, a mixture of pride and relief in his eyes. I'm glad she's reaching out. I know it's not easy. I don't know, Jay. Melissa sighed, setting the phone down. It feels like I've been carrying this weight for so long. I've always had to fix things, to be the one who holds everything together. And now, it's like, I'm not sure how to stop. Cameron reached out, taking her hand. You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, Melissa. And so is your mom, in her own way. We all have our imperfections, but that doesn't mean we can't still find ways to connect to support each other. Melissa squeezed his hand, a tear slipping down her cheek. I just want things to be better, Jay. For all of us. I know, he whispered. But you're doing the best you can. And that's enough. The next day, Melissa made her way to Diane's house, the familiar path feeling different now, less like a visit to a place of unresolved pain, and more like a step toward understanding. Diane had invited her over for a casual lunch, something simple. No expectations, just a meal and conversation. When Melissa arrived, Diane greeted her with a warm hug, this time without hesitation. Thank you for coming, honey, she said, softly. I know it's been a while. I'm here, Melissa said, giving her a small smile. Let's talk. They sat at the kitchen table, a pot of soup simmering on the stove. There was no pretension in the air, no attempts to put on a front. It felt like two women trying to figure each other out. And for the first time in a long while, there was peace. I've been thinking a lot, Diane started, stirring the soup. About everything I've done, about how I've treated you, and how I've been so focused on myself for so long. I don't know if I can ever make up for all the hurt, but I want you to know I'm really trying. Melissa took a deep breath, looking her mother in the eye. I can see that, Mom. I know it's not easy for you, and it hasn't been easy for me either. Diane nodded, her voice trembling slightly. I'm sorry, Melissa. I'm sorry for all of it. I was so caught up in what I thought was the right way to do things that I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost sight of you. I know, Mom, Melissa said quietly. And I've carried that for so long. I've carried all the disappointment, all the resentment, but I can't keep holding on to it. I can't keep letting it define our relationship. Diane's eyes filled with tears. I just want to be a part of your life, Melissa, in a real way. Not the way I was before, but the way you need me to be. Melissa reached across the table, taking her mother's hand. I want that too, Mom. I really do. But we need to take it one step at a time. I can't just forget the past, but I'm willing to build something new with you. I'll be here, Diane said, her voice filled with emotion. I'll be here, one step at a time. For the first time in what felt like forever, Melissa felt like her mother was truly present, not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't the perfect reconciliation she had always imagined, but it was real. It was honest. And for now, that was enough. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Melissa felt a little more at ease in her relationship with her mother. It wasn't without its struggles, but the communication was there, and the effort was visible. On both sides, Diane had become more open, more willing to show vulnerability, and Melissa had learned to soften her own walls. Cameron, still recovering but doing better with each day, had been a constant support. He was the glue that held everything together, not just for Melissa, but for her entire family. And with each small victory, they all moved a little closer to healing. One Saturday evening, as the sun set over California, Melissa sat on the porch with Cameron, watching the sky change colors. The sound of children playing in the distance, the faint hum of cars driving by, it was peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, Melissa felt at peace too. I'm glad you're here, she said softly, leaning against him. Cameron smiled, his eyes warm and tired, but full of love. I'm glad to be here, and I'm proud of you. Melissa rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. It's not perfect, but it's real, and that's enough for me. Cameron kissed the top of her head, wrapping his arm around her. That's all any of us need. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Melissa felt something inside her shift, a quiet understanding that life wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, being real, and learning to love each other in spite of the flaws. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough.